Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another interview of Foothills Art Center YouTube channel. You Are an Artist, where we try our very best to democratize the arts and bring them to you right in your home, all inspired by the lockdowns from COVID. But I think we're starting to see people more and more in real life now, which has been really nice. And we just want to bring you interesting interviews with artists where we talk about their art and their backstories and really get into the details without getting too academic. Again, my name is Eric Hockley, and I'm here today with an artist we're showing currently named Ambivalently Yours. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, so hello everyone. I'm an artist who works under the name Ambivalently Yours. I'm based in Canada, and I make art kind of about emotions, mostly ambivalence. So I'm really interested in mixed emotions, and I'm pretty enthusiastic also about the color pink, which is very present in my work. So that's my nutshell.
Yeah, I got very acquainted with the color pink and setting up for your installation. We have for all of you who have not seen it yet, Ambivalently Yours installation is one of our 12 foot by 24 foot walls split in half, pink on one side and red on the other, in this kind of mirrored installation, which was really fascinating to install. And I can't tell you, just to get into the nitty gritty right off the start, your idea for the putting the screw in the wall, and then we put to mount the with a magnet to mount the drawings without a frame. I use that on 2 other instances already for
Okay.
opportunities for people to post their own reactions to things in shows. It became this really excellent, clean way for people to add a little note or add a little reaction to a question that usually we would do like we've tried a lot of things. We've tried a chalkboard, we've tried dry erase, we've tried post-it notes, and this is just so great because I can put them up in a grid and it looks really clean. And that if I learned nothing else from you while we in our time together, this was like such a score. So thank you so much for that.
Happy to help.
Yeah. So tell me, if you don't mind, just a little bit about how you came to do the art you do. You're kind of an illustrator, animator for the most part, a very stylized take on portraiture. So what brought you to that? What was your long and winding road to becoming the artist that you are?
Well, I mean, drawing was always like a thing for me. Like as a kid, I was always drawing. It was sort of, I got in trouble, I remember in kindergarten, because during like free playtime, I always just wanted to draw by myself in the corner. And the teacher was like, maybe you should play with the other kids. I'm like, but I'm communicating with the other kids through my drawing. That was sort of, I mean, I obviously didn't verbalize it like that as a child, but as an adult, I'm like, that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
And then, so I went to, and so this body of work kind of came together more when I was in grad school. So like 2010 to 12. And before that, I had been working in the fashion industry. Like after undergrad, I worked in the fashion industry for about 5 years doing like textile design and marketing design. And I found that after a while, a little soul sucking. And I was like, I'm going to go back to grad school and find art again. And, I really wanted to study feminism. And I was like really hyped up about that. And so I did that. I went back to school, and it was really intimidating because being out of academia for 5 years, like you kind of lose it. And like, I didn't know anything that people were referencing. And I felt really like I didn't know what I was doing there at the beginning. It was very scary.
Was there an age gap that you were navigating also? Is that like, do you feel a little bit out of the culture because you were a bit older than most of the people, or?
Well, no, the program I went to, it was sort of, it was like a big range of ages. So it wasn't really that. It was more, I felt like I didn't know who any of the people that people quote, or the name dropping, like the artists, like I was just kind of out of the loop.
Right.
And then of course, by like the second, third semester, I realized that the same names always come up. So if you know, like at least a handful, then you're like, you can like navigate these conversations.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I was really excited learning about feminism. It helped me kind of unpack a lot of the things I was going through, like in the fashion world, which is very sexist, and it's kind of a tough world, and it's all about like consumerism and stuff.
Hmm.
So I was really excited about making like feminist art, but
Hmm.
quickly I realized that the faculty like weren't really seeing what I was doing as like feminist. I even had one faculty tell me that my work was like setting the feminist movement back, which was
Whoa,
really devastating. I mean, and fair
whoa.
enough, like some of the stuff I experimented in the beginning wasn't, it wasn't working, but I was still like figuring it out.
Hmm.
Um, and I think because my work, I like using a lot of really feminine like colors and aesthetic, and that sometimes can be misread. But I think mostly it was that because the faculty knew that I came from a fashion background, I think for some of them, they almost like expected that I wouldn't understand feminism, like that I was being duped by the patriarchy, when really what I was doing, and perhaps unsuccessfully at first, was I was trying to sort of, without rejecting everything about femininity, I was trying to like to work within it, and to acknowledge that there's still like I love the color pink, like, and perhaps I love the color pink because like because I grew up like as a girl, and you're sort of conditioned to. But regardless of that, I still love that color. And so to me, like it's not like you can't just like reject some, you don't have to reject something to you love to be feminist or to be critical of it. And so I was really interested in this pull and push and pull. And what was really interesting is that I was still working in fashion while I was doing my graduate studies. And when they found out that I was like studying feminism, like suddenly, like anytime I raised my voice about like a campaign or whatever, they're like, oh, the angry feminist is speaking up now. So it was really interesting because in fashion, I was like too feminist. And in art school, I was like not feminist enough. So I found myself kind of like stuck in between these two. And I was really exploring that in like the written work that I was doing. And finally one of my teachers like just wrote on the top of my paper like ambivalence, and I was like, what does that word actually mean? And it means just having like two opposing feelings at the same time that are both equally strong.
Right.
And so I got really interested in this idea of ambivalence and existing in this in between, and not making up your mind, and acknowledging sort of like the contradictions in our convictions and our beliefs. And so that's where I created like Ambivalently Yours, and I started just making work um, as this sort of like semi-anonymous persona, and making like drawings and animations and more written work. And yeah, that's sort of what brought me to where I am now, I guess.
Yeah, it's good to hear the story again because I've condensed it into a sentence for people every time I talk about your work, and I try and set up how you came to do what you do. And I think I was misspeaking a little bit. I think I had it in my brain that you were studying fashion design at the same time you were studying, feminist ideas, but it was actually that you were working in the
Mm-hmm.
fashion industry at the same time. But I got the bones of it correct. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting. I'd like to touch on the idea of how finding the contradictions in ideology and in like even ideologies that you really adore and concepts that you cling to, how really exploring them more deeply and getting comfortable with their contradictions and maybe the areas in which they fall short can strengthen your understanding of them. Which is this is something that we were talking about recently, was how you can't just get this like pristine image of your side and this weakened straw man image of opposing ideas and hope that you're really going to have strong arguments to represent the way you think about things. So I don't know how you would react to that, how your experiences have maybe brought you to that lesson.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's it. It's sort of like, I think that if you're too rigid in your beliefs, like if it becomes too dogmatic, like your kind of political beliefs or your beliefs about life, that you're not leaving yourself room to like change your mind when you inevitably like learn more and get more information. And I think like feminism as a movement is like full of like times where it failed. It failed like women of color, it failed trans women, it failed sex workers. And so I think you can still be like a strong feminist, but you still have to acknowledge the places where it fails. And I think that's like almost like an act of love to like acknowledge it and to be willing to talk about it instead of just being like, no, like we have to all be together and we have to all think the same way, because that, you know, it's just as harmful as like a very right wing view, I think, to be too like rigid about your view and not be critical. And, you know, I think movement, like it's in the word, like it has to keep moving and it has to be this like living, growing thing. And so to me, like that means like the questions are more important than the answers. And I think sometimes we get caught trying to find like the right answer and who has the best answer. And I think that's where sort of like the gridlock happens, where we can't like communicate with people who don't agree with us 100%. And I don't know if that answered your question.
No,
but
no, that's good. I was thinking a lot of things. I was thinking as you were talking about as you know, feminism and a lot of, you know, a lot of movements of ideology fail along the way, and you change your target or you succeed in some way, and then you find you want to narrow in your focus more deeply. Like this is true in a lot of social movements. But what I was thinking is unique about feminism, and maybe you can help me to understand this a little bit better, is that feminism has gotten broken up into waves as it has progressed, right? Is my understanding. And sometimes people, I've heard different feminists speak different stages of the game, and some of them get to a wave and then they get off the bus and they like say, I'm this wave feminist. I'm living in this iteration of the movement, which is unique to me, comparing it to other social movements where I don't, and that could just be like, maybe that's my own misperception of things. Maybe other social movements do work that way, where some people are like, no, I'm good here. And then I think it's gone too far. So how does that unique aspect of feminism tie into your experience and especially your education in it? When did you actually get a degree, or is this just something you studied in grad school alongside other things?
well, I got like an MFA, like a
Yeah.
fine arts degree, but
Uh-huh.
it was sort of like with like, I mean, it wasn't like official, but like a concentration in feminist art. And so I studied a lot of feminist art, and I studied with like some feminist artists from that like second wave 70s. So, so it was interesting. And even they had like misgivings about this idea of like breaking things down into waves. I think, I'm not sure where the waves came from, if it's like like historians who put it that way.
Oh yeah, if it's looking back in time, that the way, or maybe at the time nobody said I'm second wave, while in it, it was more,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think that's it. I understand like the purpose for it it's kind of to show like what happened during these sort of like cluster times of like important things happening. Like a lot happened like in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think sometimes, yeah, like you said, sometimes maybe people are like, no, but this is how we did things. And it causes a lot of kind of like intergenerational arguments, or
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, like feminists these days, or like women being like, oh, back then. And so I think that sometimes like classifying things that way causes more like harm than help. And I think you have to just keep, like I said before, like keep seeing it as something that's moving and that has to keep evolving
Mm-hmm.
as conversations change, as like, you know, societies change. And, you know, conversations we're having now, like we weren't having, like when I started my MFA, which is like now like 10 years ago, like we weren't having the same conversations and we weren't talking as much about like trans women, for example. And so that's not something that I thought about until later. And then I realized like some of my, that like I still had a lot to learn, and like things that I hadn't considered because it wasn't my experience, had caused me to like forget some people in what I'd consider to be like the feminist movement. So I think it's, yeah, you have to keep yeah, looking at it, and I think some people are more resistant to that idea for sure.
Hmm.
And it is a lot harder because it feels like exhausting because you just have to constantly be learning. And I think at some point you just want to be like, okay, but this is what I believe and I want to fight for this.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely tougher.
Yeah. So that there's a lot of good, like positive self criticism, I think, that comes from the way you view things and your whole your persona of ambivalently yours. And I think it, like you were saying earlier, it really is, it just strengthens your perspective on things. And now that I want to tie that back into what was the birth of the idea for this show, was we're looking forward in the schedule and we're thinking to ourselves, what can we do come election time, American election time? It's going to be the fall of 2020. What will we want to do something that ties in, but we don't want to do something overtly political or something as trite as like, I got one right wing artist and one left wing artist and I put them in the same gallery. Woo! Like, let's see
Yeah.
what happens. You know, that, and as if I could find like there's, it's not even in Colorado, there's not that many right wing artists, at least people making right wing art in a real and honest way. And I if you, hey, if you're watching this, I want to meet you desperately. Please come talk to me. Like, I want to represent a diversity of perspectives. But regardless, pitching that idea out the window, started to think more about the concept of the binary in general. And maybe elections aren't really a false binary, because in the end it's typically it is always one of two. However, there are a lot of false binaries that lead up to what puts you in the final camp. And it might be that this one actual binary has somehow set the tone for every other identifying decision we have to make in our lives. And it started to become more evident to me as I looked at social media and as I looked at just general political conversations and the way in which a headline or a news story drops, and you are instantly encouraged to pick a team. And I thought that that was something that we needed to show people and give people the tools in which to identify it. Every time something happens and you're asked to join a team, you're being forced to either ignore some information or get some half truth, or um, too quickly make a decision about what it is you're going to be, what it is you're going to represent. So getting folks the ability to step back and recognize these when they come along became the goal for the show. And I thought that if we could get some artists who are identifying this issue in their artwork, that we would really have something. And I found your work first when I started to look for like synonyms that would, and so I found the word ambivalence, and it became a search term that I used going forward. And when I found your work, it was this moment of like, aha, that I think this show could actually happen, because there really are artists out there thinking through this and dealing with this concept of being pit between two sides and not being good enough for either, and finding their own particular nook in the middle, and really exploring nuance and ideas. So that's the backstory on the show. And I'm just so thankful that you exist, that you were able to make this possible. So how would you react to that concept of false choice, and how has that, aside from your backstory that we just listened to, how else has that, kind of appeared in your life? How?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that I'm always like really interested in. And I think, like you were saying, like in terms of an election, I think even though there is like one person who wins at the end, I think that more often than not, none of the candidates that we have are like perfect. And it becomes really complicated to root for someone who you also kind of disagree with. And I think that can be like a really strange place. And I think also in how people are expressing like their support online for different candidates is being very sort of policed right now. Like for the American election, I'm seeing it, but I see it in Canadian elections too.
Hmm.
Like if you're really left, like you can't really support anyone, but sometimes voting is like more like harm reduction rather than like something that's actually going to like change a country politically. So it becomes like, yeah, like a complicated space to navigate. And I think even just like every day in our everyday life, that's like, especially now so much online, is like that gap between like how we're actually feeling and what we're expressing online or even just in person, like how that gap of like how you're feeling and what you say when people ask you like how are you is like really huge. And
Yeah.
so I'm interested in exploring like that. Yeah, like but how are you actually feeling? And that's like an
Right.
exercise I do a lot on Instagram, is that I'll just like in the stories ask people like how are you feeling, and then I'll
Hmm.
draw their responses. And sometimes it's like it's only through like sending out like an anonymous response to some random artist on the internet that you can be like on more honest. And then I see, and but for this show what I did was that I asked people like what are two opposite emotions that you often feel at the same time, like, and I got like a ton, I got like thousands of responses. And some came back a lot and some were more unique. And so I thought it was really interesting to see which emotions often like kind of go together, or which two emotions, yeah, that we don't think of going together. And I think just that process of choosing which one is okay to show is really interesting.
Hmm.
And yeah, so that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to include both sides in this, in my work for this, but also give each side like its own space to exist without the other, but also kind of need the other to make more sense. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
I love that question of how are you actually feeling and how you're really feeling compared to what you put online. You can say
Mhm,
the exact same question and just replace feeling with thinking. Like what are
mhm,
you really thinking with compared to what do you say you think online? And
mhm,
it's something about social media in general that pushes us. And I love the idea of the literal binary, the ones and zeros of digital space,
mhm,
forcing you into the metaphorical binary of having to choose between two sides, because it's easier to go one way or the other when it comes to representing an identity online. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that all three of our artists in False Choice dealt with false binaries relating to personal identity. Because I think that there's just something about being human, and that feels really good to get in a box and put other people in boxes. It's
mhm,
just it's shorthand. It's the way in which you think about other people is, oh, they are this, so and so is that, I am this like them. They are in group, other people they are out group, right? That is just it's just quicker, it's easier. It's this, we were talking, so we had this event the other night that was all about false choice, and this, we were doing these small discussion groups, and we started talking about this metaphor of the false choice being like a pool where is deep in the center and it's hard to tread water, so it's preferable for everybody to just go to the side and grab on and hang out in their sides and never want to wait out, and maintaining in the middle takes physical energy. And we talked about how when you're tired it's harder to have these conversations, and there's a literal strain that goes on, so you just end up going back to your comfortable side of the pool. um so yeah, I'm not really sure where I was headed with all of that, but there is definitely something there to the asking, giving people the opportunity to expose themselves more deeply and with more detail. And that's why I love that question that you ask of people, and why it was such good inspiration for your art, especially when you're asking them to express contradictory emotions.
yeah, well I think like going back to like how we express what we're thinking online, I think the fear of backlash is affects us a lot. It's one thing, it was one thing like just when we existed before social media, when you had to kind of, you would watch what you said, but like people won't say to your face often like what you're thinking. what they're actually thinking of you. But
Hmm.
online, like they'll say it more often. And
Yeah.
so that fear of like, I don't know, I think the more you see people getting like these online backlashes, the more it's affecting how people edit themselves online.
Hmm.
Perhaps for good, perhaps for bad, probably a bit of both. You know, I think I'm not saying that like all online backlash is bad. I'm just saying it affects how we edit ourselves, and but also online that we have so many tools to edit ourselves, like filters and like just like editing photos and editing text. And you know that's in some apps you can go back and change things, and Twitter like you can't. And so it's interesting, yeah, these like edits we can do to ourselves and how that actually affects how we're feeling, but more so like how we're actually acknowledging how we're feeling. And I think it can cause a lot of, I think once you start repressing things or putting them aside or editing them out, that's where like anxiety comes from. Anyway, for me, like it's when I'm holding things back. Um, and, you know, emotions, I think like you can try to hold them back, but they're still going to come out in a different way, either like physically or it's going to come out as this different, more volatile emotion. And so I think for me, I'm always trying to create spaces for emotions to exist and to, yeah, be validated in a way is what
Hmm.
I'm hoping for. Um, yeah, while navigating like the volatile world of the internet. And
And you are, and yeah, your persona exists as part of the internet in a way
Mhm,
that some artists don't. Well, it's more and more now, but a lot of artists I've worked with, their internet, they don't have internet personas. The internet is
mhm,
like a tool to them rather than, for you, it's a landscape in which you operate. So it's
mhm.
important to remain conscious of the atmosphere.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to set like limits for yourself and to give yourself a space to step out of it too, because it can become really all consuming, and it can be like getting a lot of like unfiltered feedback is really intense.
A lot of people will tell you to not look at any of it if
Yeah.
possible.
Like don't ever read the comments,
Yeah,
which
that's a mantra.
I'm very bad at. But and it's true that like you'll get like 1,000 nice comments, and then that one mean one is going to really stick with you. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a learning process.
You were saying about being conscious of your own feelings, and I spoke to a gentleman in this conversation group that we had, and he was talking about how you're trying to we were talking about how to navigate false binaries as this conversational pitfall, and he was saying it's really important to get well acquainted with your own personal values, and in that way you can find common ground with other people if you're very comfortable with your own internal values and perspectives on things, and not omitting any of them. You can more easily find overlap with people you might have thought you were disagreeing with. And I thought that that was a nice connection to how you're talking about being really clear and honest with your own internal workings. I wanted to ask you also about new work and what's going on with you going forward. I think that's something we don't get to cover all the time when we start focusing on what is your show that's up right now. I hope everybody goes and sees it. I think your work that's up right now is incredible, and it's a really great, just not only like showpiece because it's so big and it's this kind of complete installation, but it just ties in so nicely to the theme of the show. And I'm just so happy with how it came out. But I'd like to hear. I was just watching a music video that you animated and looking at the latest portions of your Instagram feed. So maybe you can talk a little bit about plans for the future and what's going on most recently.
Yeah, so for the last year, I've been working with this French singer goes under the name Pum, and she's like a young woman who's like a really beautiful singer and songwriter. And I designed her album cover last year, which was like kind of one of my sort of signature illustrations, but like an illustration more of her. And then sort of my quarantine project was um, they asked me to animate one of her, like a music video for her. And I had never, like I had done previously like smaller animations, but never like a full music video. And she had like this whole idea for this other world, and kind of like sort of like an Alice in Wonderland, sort of like falling down the looking glass kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really terrified at first, because I didn't know if I could technically do it or how long it would take. And of course, like they're like, you have 5 weeks to do this.
5 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow.
um and yeah, at first I was supposed to maybe work with some animators, but it became really difficult, because it's hard to have someone else try to redraw your drawings. And I was very specific about how it needed to look. And I'm the kind of person that I can't, like, it has to look good in my I'm a bit like picky about the
Hey, know
final.
thyself. Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, so I kind of like jumped in and was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And I stayed up all night, several nights, figuring out how to animate it. And I did it sort of like a kind of like a stop motion-y style, so not like a high-tech style,
Mm-hmm.
although still using like Photoshop and Premiere to put it all together. And yeah, so it came out a few weeks ago, and I'm pretty happy about it. And I'm hoping to do more of that stuff moving forward. Like I really like collaborating with other artists on projects. So it was great to collaborate with a singer where she had the music and sort of the vision, and I sort of put the visuals and help her create this world that she had in her head. Um, yeah, I'm also right now I'm doing sort of like an online residency. It's like a 1 month online residency called from a gallery in Ottawa in Canada called Art Engine, and what it's called Collab 19. And they have 4 teams that are doing like collaborative work during this residency. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
collaborating with an artist named Nia Kelly. And what we've done, our little project that we haven't quite launched yet, but we're working on it, is called Grammar School Rules. And we're both like, the sort of like cheeky headline is like, if you're trying to get your act together, follow these rules. So we've given ourselves like rules that we have to follow every day. Like for example, like if I spent too much time stress scrolling on my phone, then I then I have to draw circles for 20 minutes. And like, so I have like a set of like 17 rules. She has a set. And
Oh,
then
there's
we
rules
have,
and punishments built in
yeah.
to
So
the rules. Okay.
depending on our behavior, there's like an action that you have to do. So if you like drank enough water, then you can like draw clouds for 10 minutes. And
Ah.
every day we each create one drawing, and we
Okay.
use like one of our rules, one of the other person's rules. And then I created like a little animated GIF that you can screenshot that's just like scrolling rules. So one like random rule. So we're kind of like playing on this idea of like, one, being productive during quarantine, which is really hard. And
Yeah.
two, just like trying to control your life, your actions, and thinking about that, and thinking about also how you can't always control. And so, yeah, so we've kind of just been playing with that and looking at how, yeah, following rules and looking how when we break them, and how we influence each other as artists.
Yeah.
So
It's like a cutesy take on the self-help book,
exactly,
right?
it's kind of like
I'm sure a lot of people have been reading in quarantine, right? Just trying to take control of the moment, make the most of it. And there's a lot of those, that's fun. I like that. I like that a lot. And
yeah.
I
And I
like that
mean,
art will come out of it too as a
mhm,
there will be art as a symptom of punishment as a result of
yes,
the punishment.
yes, so we can feel both productive and punished, and but also like, but it also gives us a point to like acknowledge, like to kind of be there for each other. And the point was, yeah, to us as friends, as artists, to sort of like support each other. And I think it's easier to be compassionate for someone else than for
Hmm.
ourselves. So this project kind of allows us to be a bit of both. So it's
That's
still in the
cool.
beginnings, but it's
Yeah.
like a fun thing that we've been working on. So
Yeah, I'm interested to see how that turns out. How for the online residency, how does the work get displayed, or like what, not how, obviously it'll be displayed on a website, but in what interval? Is it something that it's leading up to a premiere online, or is it a little bit at a time?
Well, we've just kind of launched it now. We're housing it all on an Instagram because we figured that's the easiest place.
Mm-hmm.
And the handle is at Grammar School Rules in all one word.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so you can find it on Instagram and see our drawings. And then there's like a call if you want to participate, and you can like participate as well. And then we'll share some of your drawings in our stories. And yeah,
Cool.
it's still, like I said, we're still figuring it out, but because we're still kind of in the middle of the residency. But yeah, we'll see where it goes from there. And aside from that, I'm uh, still doing drawings and doing kind of. I want to keep working on the the piece that I did for the gallery, the red and pink piece. I want to
Mm-hmm.
keep
Expand it.
making. Yeah, I want to expand it. Keep thinking about it that way, and hopefully, have it exist in other galleries too, and other spaces, because I'm still interested in this. Like, it was the first time that I split my ambivalence kind of in two, and it
Mm-hmm.
was really kind of fun to look at it that way.
Yeah, I loved it, and I appreciate you going the extra mile to really to work on. I like you were saying you worked on two pieces at the same time. You had them up side by side. I appreciate your efforts to subdivide out the ambivalence and let the sauce break, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so we're gonna link off to everything that you said for sure in at the bottom of the video, to that music video for sure, to the Grammar School Rules Instagram page, to your Instagram page. I want to just thank you so much for your time and all your efforts you put towards the show. Like I said, it would not have worked if I didn't come upon your work as that real push of motivation to give me the confidence that this concept could actually become a show. And it came full circle the other night with this discussion group that we did. We had about 50 people. We worked with the Golden Anti-Racism Collective, and they were very much just interested in focusing on false binary as a conversational pitfall. And we had a lot of people that go to their meetings, and there was a diversity of opinion and diversity of thought, and just it was wonderful, and it really closed the loop for me, where art can sometimes be this one-way street. You put something on a wall and you tell people what to think about it, and you put a little card or a poster that says this is the context, this is how to view it, and they never get a really good way of being able to give back to the conversation. So having an event like this is so important to me when we do these shows with these big and interesting themes. And you were a key part of that. So again, thank you so much, and thanks for sitting down today. Um, if you guys are watching this and you want to see more things like this, please go to our YouTube channel, foothillsartcenter.org. And this is You're an Artist. If you want to contribute, you can also do that through foothillsartcenter.org, because these are free to watch but not free to make. And again, thank you everybody. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna kill the feed.